All right, Jeremy Miner, welcome to the show. Closers are losers. Remember, if you're still using old school dinosaur sales and closing techniques from the stone ages of selling, you are losing sales that you could be making. And I have a special guest with me today. I love interviewing people like this that are crushing it as a sales professional. This gentleman I'm bringing on today is Matt Boone. He lives in the magical land down under in Australia, Perth, Australia. I want to give you a little bit of a background on Matt, and then I'm going to bring him out here. So he was in the military, special operations, specializing in being a sniper. Okay, you're going to have to tell us a little bit about that. And he got out of the military. He was in the military for 6 years, got out of the military and started personal training studios. And then he had to learn how to sell. And since that point, which he'll tell us a little bit more about, he became a student of the game and became a master of sales, making close to $500,000 a year as a salesperson working for those companies. He sold in the last 6 months just 2.6 million in sales. That is crazy. He also sold 167 times $400 monthly gym memberships in just 19 days. I'm assuming that's still a record. And his close rate of the last 6 months is a whopping 71% on a sale price of $30,000. That is very high ticket like. So please welcome to the show, Mr. Matt Boone. Matt, thanks for being on the show with us.
Absolute pleasure, Jeremy. Thank you for having me on.
It's always a pleasure because our listeners want to learn. They don't care about sales trainers that give them theoretical advice that haven't even sold anything for 20 or 30 years. They care about people who are in the trenches right now. Like, what are they asking? What are they saying on their calls and to their leads, or if they're cold calling, or if they're in person to person or door to door? What are they actually doing to get those results? They want to hear from people that are in the trenches. So before we dive into some questions, can you tell our listeners, just for a couple of minutes, a little bit more about how you got started in sales and really how you got to where you are now? Like, how did you learn those crazy skills to make that much money?
I think the key was I had to eat. So I went into a business. I was a personal trainer. Then I was a pretty successful personal trainer. I was making about $200K a year.
Yeah.
And then decided, well, if I can do it in a big gym, then I can do it in my own gym. And I was wrong for the most part to begin with, because I was just given leads. It was easy. It was a very easy thing to do. And the sales, it was in an art market area, so I didn't really have to try very hard. And then so I got a gym in Bondi, and it was $11,000 a month rent, and I spent all my money opening this thing, and I just assumed if I built it, they would come.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And then I had to learn how to get them to come. And then so once I learned that, then I was talking to so many people, but I think one of the things with weight loss is there's so many mindset issues around people starting because they have so many bad habits that
Sure.
I was only closing like 1 in 5 appointments that was actually coming into the gym, let alone leads. It was probably 1 in 15, 1 in 20 leads. And that just, even back in the land of Facebook days when leads were, 18 cents, it still wasn't good enough. And so I just really had to work on it and figure out a way that I could get these people to stay in this gym and sort of get them to change the way that they thought about themselves and their body and how they're doing things. And so I just kind of went down the path of like, well, this is how I'm going to put food on the table, so I might as well focus on it. And that's sort of where I started out.
So you had to eat. So you're like, dude, if I don't learn how to sell, I'm not going to make any money, and I can't even eat. So you had to learn out of necessity. Like, you didn't have the silver spoon, right? Your parents didn't give you millions of dollars just to sit around and suck your thumb and watch Netflix, right? So
exactly, yeah.
We come from the same cloth, brother. So I wanted to ask you some questions today that I thought would really help our listeners with their sales process, like nitty-gritty tactical stuff to get to the next level in their career. So first of all, I know that you used to sell gym memberships and fitness space. What industry are you in now, and what do you sell specifically?
So right now I'm in sort of the coaching space. So I sell like business coaching. There's sort of a few different accounts that I sort of work on like sort of periodically. But generally speaking, it's sort of business coaching and it's sort of relatively non-specific. I try not to get into programs that require me to have an in-depth knowledge of the industry, or if I have an in-depth knowledge of fitness industry, so selling fitness business coaching
Yeah.
or like anything to do with marketing and sales,
Yeah.
I'm pretty all over that. But I
Yeah.
try and keep it relatively non-specific so I don't have to like learn entire new skill sets to be
Tell
able to
us why. Tell
sell.
us why that is. I think our listeners want to know, like, why is that? Because they would say the opposite. They'd be like, I have to know everything about the product and how it works and all the
Mm.
gadgets and gadgets. Why? I think you brought up a good point.
I think it's because I have no desire to ever be a business coach. And so because I don't ever want to like I'm a big fan of not having to deliver. And
Okay.
so like I really like selling and I like to be able to sell anything that I want. So I want to be able to walk into any business and I feel that within half an hour I can probably close with the best of them as
Yeah.
long as I know the basic features and benefits and sort of who we're talking to and what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
But I try and keep my sales very outcome focused,
Yeah.
very sort of like solution oriented and not sort of features and benefit oriented,
Well, you
which
hit it. Yeah,
which
you
lends
hit it on
itself to an emotional sale. Yeah.
You hit it right on the head because in sales, I see so many salespeople struggle because they're what I call product pushers, right? They think they have to know everything about the product. It's funny because I'll go into companies and I'm talking about Fortune 500 companies to do training, and they're like, "Yeah, we already do train." I'm like, "What type of training do you do? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?" And they're like, "Oh, we bring them in for a week and we teach them about the product and what it does and this and that and the features." And I'm like, wow. And I'm thinking in my mind, Fortune 500 company, and all they're doing for training is training them the features and benefits about what the service or product actually does. There's no training about what problems it solves. There's no training about what questions to ask to get them to emotionally buy in. There's nothing that way. And then they wonder why they have such high turnover, where they'll bring salespeople in, they'll spend tens of thousands of dollars training them. In their mind, they're like, okay, this salesperson's not even going to make any sales for us for 3 months. So they just lose money. And then half of their salespeople after that 3 or 4 month period drop out.
It's crazy.
That makes
It's crazy. There's just no requirement to like I truly feel that like when you believe that what you're selling is going to actually help the person and you have the ability to identify their problems plus find ones that they didn't know they had. There's that great book called The Challenger Sale, which talks about the story of Granger, where they went in because they were getting out competed and then they found problems that nobody else could solve, got all their clients back and got them to spend more money, right? And that was, for me, that was a very good book to read because I was like, okay, first of all, I figured out what kind of salesperson I was, and that was good for management of salespeople, plus like for your own, like sort of see where your weaknesses are. But also it's like that key of finding the problems that people didn't even know they had. That's when people's heads just kind of explode mid-call and they really realize that you are the one who has the solution.
You're the trusted authority, right? I was on an interview yesterday and we were talking about this subject. We were talking about how, like I just said, most salespeople are what we call product pushers, where we teach salespeople how to be problem finders. Like you're talking about problem finders and problem solvers, because you hit it right on the head. In our day and age, with today's buyer being such an information age buyer, sophisticated buyer, they already know what you do. They know what your rates are. They know who your competitors are. They know how long you've been in business. They know what your products and services do by simply doing a Google search, even on their phone. Okay. So because of that newfound power, they'll no longer be manipulated or pressured or pushed by pushy salespeople because they know they have many choices to choose the exact product or service you sell. So we have to be excellent at problem finding in 2020. And what does that mean? That means asking the right questions that get that prospect to uncover problems in their own mind that they didn't even realize they had. Just like you talked about the Challenger book, right? So you're helping them find out you're not telling them what their problems are, because when you do that, that does what? Goes in one ear, out the other.
And if anything, they might even actually resist and deny it.
Exactly. But when you learn how to ask the right questions that help take problems they didn't even realize they had and get them to from their subconscious to their conscious mind, where those problems become real, they become urgent, they'll do anything to do business with you to solve those problems. So you're becoming a problem finder, because if you can't get them to uncover problems in their mind that they didn't realize they had, or maybe they didn't realize how big of a problem it was, because maybe they knew it was a problem, but didn't realize how big it was. Or maybe they didn't realize that it can have huge consequences down the road if they don't solve it now. But it's impossible for anyone to buy from you unless you can get them to really uncover those problems in their own mind. So problem finding is huge. I'm glad you brought that up. Well, I wanted to ask you this. Can you give us, because I know everybody's going to ask, can you describe some of your biggest years in terms of income as a salesperson and awards? I know salespeople would love to hear about that. I know you make a lot of money as a salesperson.
Well, I think my biggest week of commissions was like 26,000.
Wow.
I think that was my biggest week. And in terms of years, it's hard for me to track, but it's in terms of like commissions that I generated personally is probably around sort of like 490, 510, something like that.
Yeah. I knew you were averaging between like 450 and 500,000 a year. I mean, that's income. Because I think a lot of salespeople are like, oh, does that mean like that's how much he sold worth the product? No, this is income.
Yeah. That's the commission.
That's the commission.
So yeah, it's sort of, like $5-6 million worth of product sold. Yeah. It's funny. Like initially, I think when I was selling the $400 gym memberships, because once I sort of established my gyms, and I sort of like I entered into a conglomerate of like a larger amount of gyms, and then like, so we all owned a piece of like a much bigger pie. And then I became like the salesperson for all of them. So I trained the salespeople, and then I used to open the gyms, and I would get a commission. I was on an $80K salary, plus I was on commissions, but the commissions were like $36 a sale.
Right.
And I remember I was like, yes, like that. So, the record I did was 14 in one day, I think. But it's funny. Those sales are no harder than selling $50,000. It really is no different. The conversation's the same. High ticket is relative to the person that you're talking to,
sure,
and to the perceived value of what you bring.
Right.
So, like I think the most expensive fitness product I've sold was $3,000 a month.
Sure.
That was the most expensive, and that was an online product. And it honestly, man, it's really no different. And I think that's why I think one of the mistakes that like junior salespeople make is trying to jump to more expensive things too quick. Like all these sort of high ticket closing courses and things that kind of get you. It really tarnishes the industry for a couple of reasons, but people don't value leads because they've never spent their own money, or they've never had to dial. I think dialing is a very important part of a salesperson's maturity, because you have to sort of understand like what it takes to get people on the phone. So if you do have an appointment, so like I'm lucky enough now, I have my own appointment setter, and I have someone doing my follow-ups, and I have an admin person and all that kind of stuff to make it.
Well, you've got the income to do that. You've got the income to be able to scale as a salesperson,
Yeah. And it just makes more sense, because like I have a guy now that I'm training to do all the pre-qual calls so that I can only do sales calls. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, that's going to make you more money and work less hours.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
But that guy, again, like essentially he's getting free training, and he's getting paid to get trained, you know what I mean? By someone who he kind of looks up to. So, but I think there's important for people to take steps and not just go straight to the end. I think that's one thing, because I've had a lot of salespeople come to me, they want to work under me, or they want to do stuff like that. And I go, hey, listen, like, are you willing to dial? Because I've got accounts that you can do, but you're going to have to dial it. And they go, no, I'm a closer. I go, well, are you really?
I think that's such a crazy term in our day and age. I hear all these people like, I'm a closer, hire me, I'm a closer. And I'm like, the thing is, like when I was in my sales career, I would go into a company and people are like, oh, this is the new guy or whatever, and even in those days, because I sold in 3 different industries that were completely different. And I did that because I wanted to prove to myself and other people, because I knew eventually that I was going to train salespeople. Okay. So I wanted to get experience in different industries, right? I didn't want to just stay I left an industry where I was making $2.5 million a year as a salesperson, as a W-2. Actually, no, I was 1099 my last year, because I'm like, 1099 over in the States, better for taxes, right? So I convinced him, like, you got to 1099 me or I'm out, right? But I left the industry making $2.5 million a year to another industry starting from zero. people thought I was crazy, but I knew that for me to have credibility, like I've got to say, hey, what I'm training people in sales, like I have to be able to prove that I can do that in industries that have nothing in common, like completely different industries. And so when you come into a new company like that, oh, here's the new guy. He was so good at that. He's going to suck at this, because I see so many salespeople that, let's say they sell insurance and then they leave and they become a realtor and they can't sell anything, but they were really good at selling insurance. Well, they go to a different industry, they can't duplicate that. And the reason why is because they don't understand the sales process. They had a few things that they asked that might have worked good for one industry, but then they don't understand the psychology behind why people buy and why they don't buy. And so they go into a different industry and it doesn't work at all. And then they're stuck and they feel like I can only sell this. And then that industry struggles or it goes under and they're just screwed because they don't understand what selling actually is. So I'd go into those companies and they'd be like, oh, I'm a closer. And everybody thought they were so awesome. And it's interesting to see, because I never called myself a closer. Like I wouldn't want to be considered a closer, because to me, that's almost like putting a number on somebody, like you're just there to make money from them rather than help them solve problems, right? So I looked at myself more. That's where I came up with the concept, problem finder and problem solver. And so I would go into those companies. Within like a month or two, I was the number one person. And they're like, oh my gosh, like what is he doing? He must have his own lead system, or he must be lying to everybody. He must be lying to everybody.
Somehow he's cheating. Yeah.
He's always cheating. He must be cheating. There's just no way possible. But nothing could be further from the truth. They just didn't understand that when you understand the psychology behind why people buy and why they don't, and you craft your questions around problems that your solution solves, it doesn't matter what you sell. You could pick up tomorrow, Matt, and from selling high ticket coaching, and you could go over and start selling commercial hotel spaces, whatever. And you would be the number one guy in that space because you understand the psychology of why people buy or why they don't buy. And you just craft your questions around problems that your solution solves. It doesn't matter.
I think that's why a lot of coaching businesses in particular don't scale, because the owner of the program can sell it, and he's sort of selling it through pure passion and through like the guy being on the marketing, and he has all the answers. So the technical ability is enough to get somebody over the line. Plus there's a certainty that's built throughout the marketing process. Then they bring on a salesperson and the person closes nowhere near what they do, but there's no process. Yeah. And so they go, oh, well, these guys just can't close. And it's like, well, like it's an incomparable thing. And so like these guys are, if you can sell your own product, you should be selling at 80%. 80, 90%, you know what I mean? Yeah. But a closer can come in if they're doing 50%. To be honest, that's pretty good. Yeah. And so, but there has to be a process that makes that predictable and reliable. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the main reason why a lot of businesses struggle to have the owner pull out, because the owner is just doing things in a way that is incomprehensible to anybody else. Yeah. But because he's the owner, there's a level of authority that goes with that. So you don't have to be as prowess when it comes to the actual sales skills.
Not duplicate.
But yeah, I truly believe that it does not matter what industry you're in, what you're selling. Yeah. If you have a good sales process, it will work for absolutely everything. And like, cause I've mainly sold fitness and coaching and things in those spaces, but I've sold, a little, like I'm pretty good at negotiating cars as well. So the last car I bought, I think I got 11,000 off the sticker.
Yeah. You could go to a Mercedes dealership tomorrow and probably be their top salesperson within a month or two. Easy with your skill level. You can translate it over. Right. Mm-hmm. So here's what a lot of listeners are going to ask. And this is what I want to know. What specific steps did you take to be the very best at sales in your industry? Like, what did you do that other salespeople in your industry just didn't do? Like, what separated you? Was it your cool hair? Was it just your accent? Your accent made you sell way more? Like, what did you do that others in your industry just didn't do to get to the top?
Yeah, I think there are some amazing salespeople that sell specific coaching, guys like yourself and guys like Eli, and there's some dudes that I think are at an upper echelon that have a deeper understanding of what the sale and why people act. And I think that's why I'm working with you, because I want to sort of figure that stuff out. And there is definitely like another level in terms of like my ability to close people just on the phone, like that it's pretty good. But I think there's another level that allows you to have a deeper understanding, which will give you a better sort of close rate. But in saying that, I really think that the difference is because I come from like smiling and dialing, and because I did such a high volume, like when I used to open gyms, I would sell 6 days a week for 9 hours a day. And I would, with this is before I had an auto dialer from my phone, I would do $200 a day.
Wow.
And I just figured that out because I knew that if I did 100 dials, I could get at least 2 sales. That was like the metric, that worst case scenario.
Right.
And so, but I knew if I did 100, I'd probably get 5. So I'd go try and get $200 a day. And then because I had thousands and thousands of sales calls, like it just became so I had to work on it. And so I just started listening to my own calls. And then I started to piece together something that worked. I go, well, when I did this, this really worked. When I did this, and it came out of pure necessity because I could not dedicate any more time, but I had to get a better result.
Sure.
I was like, or I can work Sunday, but I was just like,
I need one day
wasn't
off
going to
a
happen.
week.
Yeah, it just wasn't going to happen. So, and I had these crazy deadlines. I had to convert like 40, 50% of leads. Right? Because they would only give me 500 leads and I had to produce around 200 sales.
Sure.
Which is difficult. And that's all Facebook leads too. So these aren't like super crazy qualified coming through webinars. These are just a phone number on a sheet.
Sure.
And back then the sheet wasn't even automated. So I used to get emails every time leads came through. So it was it was a nightmare. So it really just came out of necessity. And then like, I definitely went down the wrong path to begin with. Like I went through like all the sort of fitness sales trainers and stuff like that, which for sure serve a purpose, but there's a real limited capacity in what you can do.
Tell us about that. Like in that industry, so you were learning from people who were quote unquote really good at selling that type of fitness or whatever, but tell us why that didn't work.
It's mentally just so draining. So it does work. Like that's the thing. It does work, but there's a lifetime because you start to hate your prospects.
Okay.
Because like the way in which you sell, it becomes quite combative and you end up sort of just outwitting people, which did wonders for my objection handling because I did no pre-objection handling. I just would go through it, pitch, and I would actually just pitch early.
For the objections to happen, right?
Yeah. Well, I'd pitch early and then objection handle and close. That was my thing, right? So I'd go quick discovery, hit the pain, do the pitch within the first 10 minutes, and then spend 15 minutes objection handling and close. Right. Like that was it. That's what I did. So it got me really good at like logic traps and all that kind of like sort of more skeevy type selling, right? Where you're sort of like, you're just mentally defeating people. It's like a mental boxing match, right? Which was okay. And then as I started to sell more expensive products, you start to sort of speak to people who are on a level where that's more difficult to do.
Yeah, it's not going to work on them, right?
Yeah, and it starts to hurt your brain and then you start getting angry. And for me, like I can get angry anyway. So I was like, okay, I've got to learn to sort of pull it back.
Sure.
And the big thing that really changed it for me was detaching from the outcome.
Yeah.
And then starting to talk a lot less and ask a lot more questions.
Yeah, you're detaching from the outcome of making the sale, and you're instead focusing on whether there's a sale to be made in the first place, right? You're seeing if I can help this person, right? And that comes across to them. You hit it right on the head. When you're selling these cheaper memberships, it's easier to knock them on the head and, push them into it, right? And if they get buyer's remorse, hopefully they won't cancel real quick, right? But what happens when salespeople sell like that? They're going to make some sales, right? But your income is not going to be, $500,000 a year like you are now. But the problem is when salespeople sell like that, it does what to them mentally? It burns them out. And that's when you hear salespeople, they just burn out. They might have a good year of selling, but then that next year, they're just done. They don't work half as hard. They just can't take it. They want to get into management then, so they don't have to sell, but then they go and teach salespeople how to sell. When you're selling combatively, like you talk about, you're using techniques that work against human behavior. So when you're selling that, when you ask a few logical questions like, what are 2 problems that you have? Or, Mr. Prospect, can you tell me what's keeping you awake at night? Okay, those are just logical based questions, surface questions. There's nothing emotional that's going to come out of that, okay? And people know that when you ask that type of question that you're just asking them because you're trying to sell them, right? So they're automatically going to put up their wall. Automatically, sales resistance comes. And then when a salesperson goes in their pitch like you did, you're going to get some people that just accept that because they're already realize they have a major problem and they're going to do something about it. But that's not most of your prospects. They're then going to throw out objections. So that walls come up, we pitch them, causes them to put up the wall even further, and then we have to push against that wall to try to break through. Like you said, it's like a boxing match.
Yeah.
And when you're in boxing matches all day long,
it's tiring.
6 days a week, you're going to burn out, right? Yeah. So why not learn techniques like you have now and like you've been using the last several years? Why not learn techniques that work with human behavior, that prevent them from putting up the wall in the first place, that take objections out of their mind before they even ask them? It's such a simpler way to sell and like 10 times more profitable. And you don't burn out. You know, salespeople that we train can be in sales for 20, 30 years. They don't burn out at all because they look at themselves as, I'm here to help this person solve their problems and challenges. But if it doesn't fit into what they're looking for, I'm okay with that. I'm just going to go see if I can help somebody else. I love that. I love what you just said there. So I want to ask you this. Can you share with us maybe 2 things that people listening right now can implement in their sales process to really get a much bigger result with what they sell?
I think there's one, like within the sales process, I think the first thing you should do is listen to your own calls. That to me is like number one. Mm-hmm. Like just listen to your calls and don't try and change your process quickly. Just make small incremental changes. Yeah. The other thing that I would do is track all your objections. So I'll talk about the process in a minute, but listen to your calls and track your objections. Mm-hmm. So if you track your close rate, which I think you should, and track your objections and all that kind of stuff, then you'll start to see patterns as to what objection you get most of the time. Yeah. And then you just try and work on that. Go back, listen to the calls, and then work into your script a pre-frame that is going to pre-handle that objection really well. Because the more stuff you have about pre-handling objections and the more sort of the questions that you can ask that kind of overcome those, like along the way, if you know there are things that you don't handle well, those are really important things that you can do to immediately increase. Like within a week, you'll increase your sort of
So
rate.
It's like an actor taping themselves and just listening to it to see if it sounds authentic, if it sounds natural. That's what you're suggesting. I love that.
Absolutely. And because it's just like, what I find is that with like salespeople in general are relatively emotional creatures, like, ups and downs and sort of stuff like that. That's why salespeople are so hard to manage, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so if someone's going through, like I had a guy that worked for me, he's a great salesperson, really good, closes really well. But like for 2 weeks, I monitored his close rate and it was like going straight down and he always got the think about it objection, always.
Right.
So I called him. I was like, what's going on, man? Is everything okay? Turns out Mrs. broke up with him. He was just in a bad space. There was a lot of uncertainty in his own life. He didn't know what to do. So he wasn't bringing his level of certainty to the calls. He wasn't projecting that. He wasn't there. He wasn't being the guy he needed to be to give the people the confidence. And so like to being able to identify that early and then taking some steps like, hey, take a week off. Okay. What I did with him is I flew him to Bali. I was like, go to Bali, chill out 2 weeks. I'll pay for the whole thing and you'll be fine. And you can close some deals in the second week. And he paid for the whole thing in like a day. Right. You know what I mean? Because I take a percentage of his commissions because I treat him, right? So like it was a worthwhile cause. And he was happy. And just the fact that somebody valued him enough to do that made him close immediately better. So I think that's an important thing if you can see those things and you can get them. In terms of a process, I think the process really has to do with one, how much the product is and how much time you can realistically spend on it to make that a profitable sale. Sure. Like if it's a $5,000 sale, I'm not doing 2 or 3 calls. Like to be perfectly honest, I'm going to do one. I'm going to close it and I'm going to put that away because the commission at most is going to be like $1,000, which is still great. Yeah. But it's not like a $5,000 commission.
Yeah. It's not a big price there, big commission. Yeah.
Yeah. But if it's a $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 program, the most expensive program I sell at the moment, $60K, that's a 3-call close. So that's a 15-minute, a 30-minute, and a 30-minute. Yeah. And then the other ones are 15:45. Sure. Which I'm trying, as you know, I'm trying to get down to 15:30.
Right. Save you some time. Exactly. I like that.
So I think that process is really important to just figure out and then try and do something in the process to build the certainty in between the 2 calls. I think homework's a good idea. And I think like webinars or some sort of video they can watch. Yeah. I like to get rid of the logical stuff in between the calls because you don't want to have to answer stupid questions about like, oh, like how many times a week am I going to speak to you? And those are all like things that are irrelevant that just get in the way of someone
Sure.
taking action on something. So get it all out the way as soon as you can and start to talk about the real problem and start to really get into really what's going on and making that framework of moving forward.
And what you brought up something here, this rep that you train, that you manage now with your company, how you did that for him because he didn't have that certainty. Tell us a little bit more about what that certainty means and how you gain certainty as a sales professional. I think that's something that a lot of salespeople struggle is they don't have that certainty. They don't have that confidence. So tell us a little bit more about what's behind that and how do they get that?
For sure. I think with me, like, it's just sort of like with me, it's just how I am. I've been told many a time I talk with a very high level of certainty.
Well, you're a sniper, dude. I mean, you're a sniper in the military. I mean, you got to be certain.
I spent my 20s kicking doors in and, I was in Afghanistan for a long time and Indonesia and all kinds of places like that. So that's sort of, I think, where that comes from. But also, like, I think when you're selling is like acting a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I think you need to have mechanisms that put you into the correct mode.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I always sell with a hat on. Always. Almost always. Unless I'm on like a video conference or something like that, I usually won't. Sure. But I usually have that. Also, little reframes where if you feel yourself rambling, I teach guys to smack themselves in the stomach if they do something that like puts them into like story mode.
I like that. You know what I do?
To ramble?
I have them put a rubber band. When I'm training salespeople, I have them put a rubber band on their wrist. And when they start talking more than like 30 seconds, I have them snap their wrist with the rubber band so it hurts.
Yeah. Yeah, you need something to frame you into that, like into that mode where like, okay, I'm here for that person. I'm not irrelevant, but I'm not the person that needs to be the focus on.
Sure.
Because everyone's default is to talk about themselves. I don't care who you are, what you do. That's everyone's default. So, and people like talking about themselves. So the more sort of you can push it towards that other person, the better. Sure. So I think like daily routine is really important. So like, for example, I have the same breakfast every day.
Yeah.
I also have the same lunch every day. I'm just a very routine person like that.
Yeah.
And then I run off a diary. So like the more predictable my schedule is, like the less
you are.
Yeah, like the more consistent I am. Because a lot of salespeople are really inconsistent.
Yeah.
Like they'll have a huge week and a bad month and then like stuff like that. Like there are some variables to sales that just make that be kind of how it is like that. But the huge ups and downs a lot of the time are just due to highs and lows of personality types.
Yeah.
And so having something that just levels you out, having a nice workspace,
I
think is really important. And then having like work clothes. You don't have to dress like I just dress normal, but I do have different clothes that I wear. Like as soon as I finish at 4.
Yeah.
And then I also have like, this is my Nokia flip phone.
Yeah.
I have, which is my phone when I'm not working. So this has got no internet, no social media, no nothing. And so I turn off because I got 2 kids. I just go, at the moment it's like it's end time.
Yeah.
No leads have that phone or nothing. I've got a few other phones for calling leads.
3 phones, man. That's crazy.
Yeah. And then I've got one on my computer as well. But it's because I segment things and like I don't call people for reminders for sales calls from the same number because I want to make, anyway, there's a whole bunch of reasons why. Yeah. So I just want to make sure that I can always talk to people. They're not like, oh, I need to talk to that guy, but I'll do it later type thing.
You've brought up several good points. I think confidence, it comes from having a routine. In sales, like I would do the same thing every day, right? Like I would show up to work around the same time. I would get up in the morning around the same time. I kept a daily routine. And I always saw salespeople, like you said, that would have 1 month would be great. The next month would be down. 1 month would be great. The next month would be down. And they were just inconsistent in that. They'd show up at the office around 11 or in the morning and they would work till 7 or something. They were just inconsistent. They were just all over the place, right? They would let distractions. They would get a girlfriend and for the next 3 months, their sales plummeted, Or this salesperson, she would get a boyfriend and she got all goo-eyed and, for 6 months, she like disappeared or she didn't hardly do anything. So it was just that inconsistency, right? Because they let outside distractions come into their world during normal work hours. After work hours, you're right. You don't need the work distraction. Spend time with your family, spend time with your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. But don't let the distractions in work hours take over to you. Like if you're scrolling through Instagram and Facebook half the time on your calls, you're not even listening to them
it's
or
crazy.
understanding, you're just not going to sell as much.
Yeah, I think figuring out like, and also having time set aside to do particular tasks that are going to make you income.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, I think it's like salespeople that ask for referrals make like at least twice as much money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so things that I always try and do is there's no distractions when I'm on a call. I'm like sort of in my little quiet space and I'm just trying to listen as intently as I possibly can with no internal monologue whatsoever. Just really listening. The second thing is I have scheduled time for follow-ups.
Yeah.
It's super important. Like when I was a personal trainer working in like a big sort of like Bally's type fitness, like a Gold's Gym type thing.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, yeah, man, just walk the floor. And that's what I did. But what I never did, Monday from 5 to 8 p.m. was my prospecting time because it's the busiest day in the gym.
Yeah.
So I knew I would always, if I left those open for trial sessions, I could always get people booked in like for that Monday and they were always going to be at the gym. So I always had like 4 or 5 trial sessions every single week, which meant that I was packed all the time. Right. And so like that taught me a lesson of like, okay, I need to have times for follow-ups always. I need to have open spots in my diary that are like, I hit the phones and I call.
You're doing income producing activities.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, it was just sort of second nature to me because I was like, well, that just makes sense. If everyone's there, I don't want to be training clients during that time because that's an income, but like, that's never going to cause me more income. So I might as well keep that open. So like, and I think a lot of salespeople don't follow up. One of the things that like when I used to do my old style of sales, I couldn't follow up because I used to beat people up so badly.
There was no chance, right? They didn't buy on the first call, was over. Right.
It was over. So, but now it's now I can feel when I'm getting to the point of when it becomes unproductive. Yeah. And so I pull it back and then schedule follow-up calls. And then every Friday I spend about 2 hours just going through a list. And I use Close.io, which is like a front-end CRM, and I can create lists with an auto dialer of like pitched. So I can go through all the people who I've pitched and who are good fits. And then every Friday I can hit them up.
So you have an organized sales process every day of the week. It's like a factory, right? So think of like if you're a car factory and you're unorganized and you just kind of walk in and like start to do something different each day. Well, how's that car going to look on the outcome? But factories don't. They come in and you do this, this, and this every single day. And that's what you have to be as a sales professional. I think that confidence also comes by knowing exactly what to say and more importantly, ask when you're talking to your prospects. Because if you don't know what to say, if you don't know what to ask when you're having a conversation with your prospect, by default, you're not going to have confidence, right? You're just winging it. I see so many salespeople and companies winging it. Every call is something different. Say something different. Ask something different. There's no systematic sales process that's duplicatable in their companies. And because of that, they'll have some salespeople that will succeed, but then most just are turnover, because nothing is actually duplicatable. And I think that having that, what I call collective confidence, only comes from your systematic way to sell, like your process, doing the same thing over and over and over, but also being able to know exactly what to say and more importantly, ask when somebody answers the phone. Because if you don't know that, it doesn't matter how many Tony Robbins, and I love Tony, it doesn't matter how many Tony Robbins CDs you pump in before work to pump you up to make those calls, that's going to wear off. The motivation will wear off if you're not succeeding, if you don't have the confidence from your sales ability. If you don't learn those skills, you're never going to have that confidence.
And there's 2 types of silence, and they're very obvious which ones they are. There's the silence where it's intentional and it's dramatic and it's on purpose, and the silence where you just do not know what to say and you're doing mental gymnastics, which is always an interesting one to hear. But I think that level of consistency and just like taking it, like the thing is when you're doing commission on these sales, it's very easy to like, you know, because like I make about $2,000 to $3,000 per sale, right? Yeah. I could very easily just make one and then take the rest of the week off. Yeah. Like my expenses are not more than $3,000 a week. Well, I mean, they are, but not much. Yeah. But like there is an element of complacency that can come in quite easily.
Sure.
But like, you've got to have that level of consistency, because like accounts get shut down, leads slow down. Like, you're not in control of that, and you never will be unless you're the business owner.
Yeah.
And so you have to have a pipeline,
Yeah.
and you have to have a process that you can take people through. Like, I've never really done much cold calling. I've done a tiny bit of it, but like, it is a skill that I do want to have because I can call leads.
Yeah.
So, you know, a lot of closers, like a lot of guys who are closers, they've never called a lead. They don't know what to do. They've only ever had stuff set for them. And so I think it's kind of a tragedy, because those people are doomed, because like, I worked on an account and the Facebook ads got shut down for 6 weeks.
Yeah. What are you going to do then?
I made sales. It didn't matter. I had a pipeline that lasted me for about a month. You know what I mean? So I was able to consistently make sales. And then I called all their members. I'd got referrals. Like, you do what you got to do. You got to have strategies, you know what I mean? Because you can't just always rely on new, fresh leads and appointments that are banging them in. Like, you have to have.
It's not going to. Yeah, you're exactly right. It doesn't matter what company you work for. It's not like going to be that way for 10 years straight, where there's no challenges in their marketing, or leads don't convert as well, or maybe the lead quality goes way down. I mean, it's not. You have to understand how to have that pipeline all the time. I agree with you 100%. Matt, that was an amazing interview. Thanks for being on the show today. I know that our listeners, what you went over with them today is something that works today. Like, you're in the trenches, you're making sales calls, you're going to wake up in the morning, you're going to be on the phone making calls. Like, the advice and what you went over today is going to help them make sales today. Any last words of advice for our listeners real quick before we end the show?
I think the key with sales is, again, listen to your phone calls. And if you know that there's a specific hole in your game, find someone or something to fill it. Yeah. So I don't want to give a shameless plug to Jeremy, but I had a very particular hole that I found in my game. And I calculated that hole was probably costing me maybe $100,000 to $250,000 a year.
That's a lot of money.
It's a very small thing, but it's a lot of money. And it was simply a show up rate in between pre-qual and show up. And I was applying too much sales resistance. Yeah. I saw an interview with Jeremy and Eli, and what he said, one thing, I was like, oh, that's the thing. And I called him, I messaged him on Facebook, got on the sales call, signed up to him, and it fixed the problem within like a couple of weeks. You know what I mean? And just it's the small tweaks. And that will then create a lot of revenue.
That investment you made is like 2% of what you're going to make even this year from that tweak. Yeah, for sure. And so it just makes sense to do stuff like that. If you find that you do have a hole in your game in sales, you have to back yourself. Yeah. You have to realize that every time you invest in something that will make you tangibly better at it, then you will make like 4 or 5, 10x that investment. Right. And so getting in front of those people, finding someone whose style resonates with you. Not everyone's style is going to be the same. You might be a Cardone guy and you love beating people up. You might be an Eli guy. You're very heart-centered. You might be a Jeremy guy who's like it's a very particular style and it's very, very effective. Sure. You know what I mean? But like, just find something that resonates with you and then go towards it and stick to the line. And then just find small tweaks and just always try and get a little bit better, because like the results will skyrocket your. Yeah. It's the motto in our company is training. When we ask corporations or salespeople, is training something you did, or is training something that you do? Because the world's best in any industry, let's say professional athletes, Tiger Woods, LeBron James, football players, soccer players, did they just train like 10 years ago and they're good? They don't need any more training to get better? No, they're continually training. Top salespeople are at the very top and make the most money because they continually improve. They continually train. They read more books. They take more courses. They go to more sales training seminars from people who can actually get them results, not just from old sales gurus that sold 30 years ago that are still using that wham, bam, you manipulate them, throw them over your shoulder and go on. That just doesn't work with today's information age buyer. I mean, if you want to work 12 hours a day and make hundreds of calls to make a living, then yeah, sure, go ahead that. But you're going to be mentally beat up and you're going to want to get out of sales within a few years. But if you want to learn
those old sales trainers as well are also the reason why it's more difficult now, because you see movies like Wolf of Wall Street and you see movies like Boiler Room, and that's what the image of a salesperson is to everybody. And so they hate you before you get on the phone. So you have to sort of figure out a way to navigate that and realize that what you're being said is through a prism. Yeah.
In those days, they were like, let me tell you about the opportunity. And they sold on an opportunity. But in our day and age, that's in ear one out the other, because people have heard that so many times that they're very skeptical. They're very cautious. Today's buyers are very cautious and skeptical. So when you use techniques that work against human behavior, that skepticism and cautiousness even increases. So, and especially times that we're in right now, in a time of economic contraction, because it's easy to get lazy when selling is easier during times of economic expansion that we've had the last, 4, 5, 6 years. But in times of economic contraction, every shortcoming in your salespeople's sales skills will only be magnified and will cause them to lose sales that they could be making for themselves and their company. 100%. Matt, that was a great interview.
Thank you, Jeremy. It was a pleasure.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon, man. Thanks for being on the show.
Now, if you're serious about joining the top 1%, I mean the top 1%, and you want to experience more training content just like this, click the links right over there. Right over there, they're exactly what you need to see next. You see, I release new episodes featuring top salespeople and sales authorities, multiple six-figure, high six-figure, even 7-figure earners. And if you're new here, do yourself a favor and smash that subscribe button right below, and join our new Facebook group, Sales Revolution. You see, it's free, and there's a link in the description below just for you. We put it there for you. Finally, I make posts on Facebook and Instagram each and every day with more tips and training. So be sure and follow me and turn on your notifications. So make a comment in the first 7 minutes to any of my latest posts, share this episode, and there's a very real chance that you're gonna win some killer prizes. And here's the thing, don't sit on the sidelines. Don't be like everyone else. Get into the game. Join the sales revolution. Stay active, get involved, learn the right skills, and we will show you how to take your life and income to a level that most only dream about.